All right, welcome back to the John Gill Podcast Show. And on this episode, I'm super excited to have on Greg Dickerson of Dickerson International. He's a serial entrepreneur, real estate developer, coach, and mentor. And he has bought and developed and sold over $250 million in real estate, built and renovated hundreds of custom homes and commercial buildings, developed residential, mixed-use subdivisions, and started 12 different companies from the ground up. He mentors entrepreneurs, investors, and developers, and he helps them to grow and scale their business. His clients have over $2 billion in assets under management and deals in process. So we're super excited to have him on. Greg, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, John, thanks for having me.
Yeah. And Greg, before I start off, I want to say I'm a huge fan of what you put out there on Instagram. I've been following you. It almost seems like since you started, I think I saw from your first video to your current video, they're just excellent. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So Greg, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah. So, I started in the business in 1997 as a remodeling contractor, handyman guy, and just doing little jobs. Built that into a $30 million building company in 7 years. Started 12 other companies along the way and kind of sold everything off in 04, 05 and focused strictly on development and investing from that point on. So, what I learned early on was to build businesses that generate cash flow to invest in other assets. So I just did that at scale with a number of businesses, and I still do that now, but now it's just more outsourced, versus me working in any particular business. I coach and mentor people and do, deals with people that are already either existing operators or people that want to start something, and I kind of do the business through them. So everything's kind of outsourced, delegated, turnkey now versus, having the actual operating companies myself that I owned, in the early days.
Amazing. And how were you able to scale? Let's talk about mindset for a second, because I think that's probably one of the key important steps to going to that extra mile in this business. What are some of your go-to books for inspiration?
So I started out with, Think and Grow Rich, Power of Positive Thinking, in terms of mindset books. And then Rich Dad, Poor Dad was a bit of a mindset book and had some mindset shifts in there. So reading those three when I started my entrepreneurial journey in 97. Now, prior to that, I joined the Navy right out of high school, so I was military. So when I started out, I started with nothing, from nothing, no connections, no anything. So I learned it all the hard way. But, I went through the Navy. I did get some good training there, not mindset, but business training, discipline, leadership, systems. You learn a lot of that in the military. Then when I got out, I was working in the restaurant industry, and I received some really good business training there. Learned how to budget numbers, run an operation by the numbers, by the systems. Learned how to become a leader, delegator, motivator. How to manage, recruit, hire, train, manage people. How to really delegate a lot of employees, because in a restaurant, you got 100 employees in one restaurant, and I had 13 of them that I was managing. Wow. So I'm a fast learner, hard worker, and they assigned us a number of books from a management standpoint that were really eye-opening for me. The 1 Minute Manager series, a book called Managing by Harold Janine, founder of ITT or CEO of ITT, multi-conglomerate. So his book was really good on how to run a number of operations, a number of companies. So I just read those things, and they can do it, I can do it. So in terms of mindset and belief, you want to find somebody who's doing what you want to do, who has accomplished what you want to accomplish, and you find your proof in concept in them, then you reverse engineer what they did. So I didn't know any better, right? I didn't go to college. I didn't have anybody telling me you couldn't do anything or could do anything. I read these books about people that achieved great, extraordinary success. I learned from Napoleon Hill all about mindset, that if you believe, you will achieve, and that if you follow a process. Now, that doesn't mean you can believe and then lay in your bed or sit on your couch.
Right.
It means that, there's a process. So if you have a sincere desire, if you want it bad enough, if you educate yourself and you have some skills and develop those skills, then you can achieve what anybody else before you has achieved. So that's really what I got out of all of that. And then, of course, Napoleon Hill was big on the Mastermind,
right,
having mentors in the Mastermind. And what was really cool about that was he's like, look, a mentor doesn't need to be alive here with you. You can learn from somebody. So I started reading everything I could find about successful people in all kinds of industries, all kinds of business, leadership, management, I studied Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, Harvey McKay, Jim Rohn. Just all of them. And so the difference is with me, going back to when I first started, it was books, and then it was books on tape. I had the little Walkman, and if I was out exercising, I had my headphones on and I'm listening to tapes. And then it was the CD player, and then it was the iPod. I still have my 80 gig iPod with all my books on it. So I've never owned music that I've listened to, whenever I've been out exercising and doing things. So I consumed, probably over 1,000 books. If I went back and looked at it, it's been probably over 1,000 books in my, entire career of 30 plus years, 1985 going to the Navy. I got out in 89. So from 89 on, of consuming books and personal professional development content, never do I ever have music on it. I don't have any music on my iPhone now. It's all books, tapes, personal and professional development. So that's kind of how I did it. That's amazing.
And how did you take the plunge from, going from some of the smaller deals to just those bigger deals? At what point did you decide, that? Then let's talk about some of your first deals. How did you source some of those? And then at what point did you decide, I'm going to go on to some of these larger properties?
It's all awareness. And it's funny because I made a video the other day. We all hear that, your network is your net worth, and it's not, what you know, it's who you know. And, I don't agree with that. I think it's what you know and when you know it, and more importantly, whether or not you apply it. So for me, it was what I knew when I knew it. So I just didn't know what I didn't know. And my first deal was a lot flip. I had a friend of mine that was a realtor, and he said, I was successful with my building company and other things I was doing, and I was building a lot of cash. And at the time, I'd read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'd read some other real estate investing stuff. And, I kind of had a little bit of it in my head, but, I just didn't know anything about it, right? I'd bought a house. I was, owned my own house and all that. Actually, I was on my second home by then. So I knew you could buy real estate, but I didn't know you could flip real estate. So this realtor comes to me and he's like, yeah, man, we can buy this lot. You put up all the money. My dad's got a client that'll pay us, $50,000 more than we're paying it. And, we can make a spread there. He said, I know the seller and we can buy it under market value. I was like, I'm looking around like, can you do that?
Right.
He's like, yeah. So we did it. So I put up the money. He did everything else. We flipped it. We split, whatever it was, 30, 50 grand. And I was like, man, in 30 days, I was like, this can't be real. And he's like, oh yeah, people do this all the time. So that kind of clued me into, and I was in a market where land values were escalating quickly, and I was a builder. So then what I started doing was tying up land and flipping it to my clients and then building them a house.
Wow.
So I started doing that. I was in a vacation rental market, so it was all investment property driven. It was all about cash flow. This was back before 2009. So you could borrow money on a credit score. They went on appraised value, not cost. So they would loan you based on the appraised value. With new construction, the houses were always worth more than what you could buy. Mm-hmm. So if you bought, existing homes, you'd have to put 20% down, because they would kind of appraise at what you're paying. But if you're doing new construction, they appraise for more than what the actual contract was to build,
right,
and the cost of the land, because it was appreciating so fast. It was a really great business model. So I started focusing on that. And I had a friend of mine who was a developer that was a very sophisticated developer that came down, and he taught me how to build spec houses and how to develop land. And he totally took advantage of me and really, tried to cheat me. And that relationship did not end well, but I learned a ton. He cost me a couple $100,000 that he took advantage of me and kind of, cheated me out of. But I learned some really valuable lessons there. Just didn't know what I didn't know. So for me, it was just stepping my game up, doing bigger and bigger deals, learning from people by doing deals with them, learning from people as mentors. I took some courses and things like that. So I took some apartment investing courses, read some books. I had a couple of mentors in the commercial multifamily space, the old school guys, Dave Lundahl, read all his stuff, took a couple of his courses. Then there was another guy named Anthony Menudo, another guy named Scott Shield back in the day. Of course, the residential was Carlton Sheets,
Oh yeah, Carlton. Yeah.
Yeah. Russ Whitney, he was out there. So, I was reading and studying those guys, went to some seminars, that kind of thing. So, that's kind of how I learned. And then I'm a doer. So if there's an idea, like I'm the guy that if you came up to me and said, hey man, I've got this idea to go, do this business and, manufacture widgets and go, I'm like, okay, let's go. So,
right.
I just do. So I'm a doer. Mm-hmm. So once the idea hits, and that's how success works, right? You get the idea, you start thinking it, you start speaking it, then you go do it. That's how success proceeds. The idea, faith, belief, the means to implement it, then you got to just do it. So that's me. I just like to do things. I like to build things and develop things. I like to take action.
And the execution, I think, is more important sometimes than just the planning, right? I think people take too long sometimes to plan and not really execute. Has that been the case?
Yeah.
Okay. And as far
people get stuck in analysis paralysis. There's
right.
so much information now. So I was fortunate in my early career. There wasn't that much information. There wasn't any internet. So it was just a few books, a few courses, and it was only a handful of people teaching. So for me, it was real easy. It was like, okay, well, this is how you buy apartments. There's one book on it, so I went out and did it. And then, obviously there were the Sam Zells and, people like that. And then I had other people around me that were real estate developers and successful business entrepreneurs that were coming down to my area where I lived, and they were buying these $1 million beach houses. So I would be like, okay, where'd you get your money? How do you make money? So I would sit down, and that's the other thing, is that I've always been a seeker of wisdom. So I would always use that term. And for anybody listening, if you want knowledge from somebody, never reach out and say, let me pick your brain. You just don't do that. So what I did and what people do now is I would say, look, I'm a seeker of wisdom. You've been very successful in your career. You're buying these big beach houses. Man, I would love, 5 or 10 minutes so I could just learn from you. I want to be where you are. I want to do what you're doing. It would just be, so that's kind of how I always approached it, as a seeker of wisdom. I really admire what you've achieved in your career. I would love to be able to do what you do. Would you share your success with me? Would you share your wisdom with me? That's kind of how I approach it.
That's amazing. You're right. I think that the wrong approach is always to just, let me pick your brain for a second. I think it just, there's different means to the end, and that's definitely not the best approach. Now, how have things changed as far as underwriting deals from when you started to now? Has anything really, is the equation more or less the same? You identify the property, you underwrite it. Have assumptions changed drastically from when you originally started to today, or are things more or less the same?
Yeah, it's all the same. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. It's income and expenses. So if you're talking about cash flow properties, it's dollars in, dollars out. If you're talking about development, it's, what is the end value? What's the end game, the end sale? And then you reverse engineer that all the way back into what your land cost is to determine that. So nothing new has changed there. What has evolved and changed is the financing. So, what you pay for an asset is permanent, right? The financing is what's temporary. So that's the game that has changed over the years. And, financing is the key. And that's both in the private markets and in the public markets, private money versus, capital markets, debt markets, things like that. So those things have changed and evolved over the years. But fundamentals of a deal are the same. It's for development, it's ground up, outside in, dirt's dirt, right? Technologies have changed, building materials have changed, processes have changed, but the fundamentals of how it works has never changed, and it never will, in terms of how these things are done. Now, the business model changes too. So, the whole value add game right now, this is, June of 2020, we are still in the coronavirus situation, and we have riots and things going on. So in terms of how you underwrite something right now at this given time in our history is very different than how I was underwriting 3 months ago and even 6 months ago, so in terms of what you're looking for, and 2 weeks, 6 weeks from now, it might be different still. So that has changed in terms of assumptions of, risk, liability, and whether or not the business plan of value add or opportunistic is going to work like it was even 6-8 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, as far as the difference between an investor deciding to go into development or multifamily, what would you recommend for someone who's actually just looking to start in the real estate game? Should they go straight into multifamily? You hear from different, Grant Cardone says, go straight into multifamily apartment community investing, don't go for the 2 to 3 flat deals. What would you say about that?
So we had that conversation. I don't know if you saw that.
I did.
With Grant,
that was a great.
Ago. We kind of talked. Yeah, thanks. We talked a little bit about that, and we have differing philosophies. So Grant is big, right? So go big. Everything's big. But he's doing a little training program now where he's talking about starting a little smaller. So what I would say is, and there's different debates on this equation. Some people say start small and work your way up. Some people say start big. You can't start super big. Anyway, so it depends on your experience, your skill level, your expertise, your knowledge of real estate in general, your comfort level, your financial resources, your ability to borrow money, and your network of who you know and the ability to raise capital. So with all those things in place, there are people that debate, hey, you got to start small and scale your way up. That's what I did. There's people that say, hey, you can start at 20 to 100 units, but don't go any bigger than that, which is fine. And then there's people that I know personally that have started at the 2, 3, 500 unit level and scaled from there to 5,000 units and sold their portfolio. Now, that group came from the institutional world. They worked for Blackstone or BlackRock. I get them confused.
Blackstone, yeah.
So they were in the they were in the institutional world. So they came from there in the high level real estate world. So 2 or 3 of those guys came together, and their family were in the business of real estate development prior. So they grew up in it. They had a background, and they had the ability to raise capital, and they knew the business. So they came together, formed the company. These guys were in Detroit and started buying, 500 to 1,000 unit properties, and scaled that up to it was 5,000 or 8,000 units. I can't remember what it was, huge, and then sold it off over a 5-year period. So they started at 500 units, So that's that group. Me, I started with a lot flip. Then I started building spec houses. Then I started developing commercial properties and residential subdivisions. And I built office buildings. And for me, it was just, what's the next challenge I haven't done yet? And I was meeting all these people that were doing these different things. I'm like, man, that's cool. So I would just do whatever came along. And I had a building company. So I was building these things for people. And then I'm like, well, shoot, that's when I realized the people I'm working for is who I want to be. So then I would start and do my own project. So that's kind of how I scaled. And, so what I tell people is, number one, wherever you're comfortable in your knowledge and your skill set and your ability to take risk, and that ability and tolerance level is going to change throughout your life. So I'm in a very different place now at 52 than I was in 1997 when I was, 28, 29, when I was starting out. I had my kids were young. We didn't have a lot to lose, so I could take big risk, and I wasn't afraid to lose it all and take big risk. And, I've kind of always been a risk taker as I've gone along, but now I'm a little smarter and more protective of what I've built to earn, over the last number of years. So I'm a little bit more cautious about, how I approach the business now. And I'll probably even get, more risk averse as I get older. So that's going to be different for everybody. I mean, I know people that well into their 70s and 80s that still risk it all and roll the dice. They don't care. Right. So, it just all depends on what your goals are. So anybody can start anywhere, but you got to know what you're doing. And if you don't, you got to learn. So then you want to start small, and learn your way up. So then your mistakes are minimized because they're smaller. You've got less to lose. If you go big, you can mess up big if you don't know what you're doing. And then you can leverage with partners and all that kind of stuff. So there is no one size fits all.
Yeah, that's a great point. What a great answer. And now, as far as choosing a specific market, I know that you're in the Southeast, or that you like to look at markets in the Southeast. How do you identify a market? What are the sort of trends that you look for?
Yeah. So, and on that last topic, so like for Grant, okay, scale. So if you want to scale fast, you got to go big. That's how you scale, right? There's more efficiencies. There's more, operational efficiencies as you go, and economies of scale, and development has bigger margins. So Grant doesn't do development. He won't do that. He buys existing properties. I do development because you can double your money. There's bigger margins faster. You can double your money in value add. It's going to take you 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. In development, you can do it in a couple of years. So that's why I develop. That's why I've done that. It's bigger margins faster than the value add or the core plus strategy. So in terms of markets, I like the Southeast for a lot of reasons. One, obviously population growth. Right now the hot spots are, Arizona, Nevada, Arizona areas, Texas, Mexico's got a little growth going on there. And then of course, that Southeast coast from, Florida down in, some areas of Georgia, South Carolina, but mostly in Florida. And I like the weather conditions as well. You don't have the operational expenses, delays, cost issues that you run into with winter weather conditions in some of the other parts of the country. But, you want to go where you have, net migration, where the population's increasing, more people are coming than going, net population increase, job growth, income growth. And generally, if the population's increasing, the income and all that other stuff's going to be there too. So you don't have to dig too much into that. You just want to look at net migration. Where are people going and where is the population growing? And
does climate change ever come into effect in your analysis? I mean, do you think that maybe if climate change accelerates, is that a concern? Or are you kind of in these, 2-3 years, 4 years, it's not really going to be that much of a change to?
Yeah, I don't, so I don't hold long term. I build and sell.
Right.
That's what I like to do. Or I'll buy an existing, opportunistic kind of deal and turn it around and sell it. So I don't really worry about the long term in that respect, other than like the coastal region. So, the coastal regions, you have to take that into effect. You have to look at erosion rates. You have to look at flood zones, and things like that. So, your environmental concerns can come into play there. But, overall, it depends on the area that you're developing in and what you're looking at. You want to make sure you're not in a flood zone. You want to make sure you're not in a coastal hazard zone, all those types of things. And if you are, you got to mitigate those things and get in and get out, and be prepared for it and have the right insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. And going to that, piggybacking a little bit on what might happen, what have been some your biggest challenges to date? Some of your top challenges that you've seen on let's say the 3 biggest challenges that you've faced in real estate, and how have you overcome those?
The biggest one, I just didn't know what I didn't know. I mean, that was your, I don't know if you want to even call it.
Yeah, I guess.
It's just, I mean, in terms of
True.
Holding back growth, just not knowing and not being aware of what the possibilities were and, what I didn't know. So I always tried to find out what I didn't know. I've been a seeker of wisdom, tried to learn as much as I could, and what is it that I don't know? What am I missing? And try to learn from there. And there's so much information now that you can learn so much quicker. So that was one. The other thing early on for me was, I didn't know how to raise capital early on in my career. If I would have, I did everything with my own money, so that $250 million, deals that I've done, that is just my own money. I've done, 400 or 500 million, with other capital, but my own personal resources, that's how I started. So that limited me. That was kind of a challenge. My first business is, I financed on credit cards, and getting zero interest, car payments for new company trucks. And, I did all the stuff you're not supposed to do. Zero interest wasn't bad, but, credit cards is definitely not the way to go. But I didn't have any money. I had no other way to finance my business. So, I literally remember going and buying tools as I needed them with the cash I was making from the jobs and then reinvesting all the profits. So I didn't make a lot of money in the early years because I was reinvesting all the cash into the business. And then on real estate deals, I was just doing what I did with the cash flow, with the money I was making. So had I have known how to raise capital back then, like I know now, man, I could have blown it up and grown a lot faster.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How do you source your deals today? Is it just broker relationships? I mean, do you pick up the phone and still call owner of lots, or how are you sourcing these sort of deals today? Or what's
for development land, I've always had a system there for farming vacant land in certain areas for things that I'm looking for. But I've been at it since 1997, so people know me. So I get calls and emails every day with projects, properties, and I'm working with people all over the country. So deals just come to me, and I've had a reputation as a closer. So number one, I'm easy to work with. People know that I close. They know that I know how to get deals done. So when you have that reputation, stuff just comes to you. But for certain things, you do have to have a system. So for vacant lots, infill development, I stay on top of the brokers, communicate with them, let them know I'm still there. So even though they know you, you still have to keep letting them know, hey, I'm here, I'm ready to close. Yeah, that kind of thing. But the bigger deals, that's more of a pipeline that just, kind of comes to me. Same thing with capital. I don't have to raise capital anymore. It just kind of comes to me. And, in my social media, like you're talking about, people will see that and reach out to me and say, hey, do you have any deals that you're looking for capital for? So I get, emails and calls every day on that just because I'm out there and people know that I know what I'm doing, so it's a little easier now, but it's been 30 years in the making.
So if someone's watching the show, let's say if someone wanted to partner up with you, is that something that you'd consider if they've got a great deal in a different market? Is that something you might entertain, or are you very selective with who you're partnering up with?
Yeah, I'm very selective with that. I don't partner, as a rule. I've just been down that road enough to where I just don't need complications. So, what I do is I coach and I mentor people. And then if somebody has a deal, I like to be in charge. I like to be in control. At this point in my life now, if there's an opportunity like in a company or a business or something like that, and I come in and take equity in an advisory role in an existing concern or company, I'll do some of those types of things. So it's not really a partnership. It's more, getting equity for intellectual capital. So I do those types of deals. and things like that. And, I've got a handful of people that I've done deals with over the years. So, I'm just not at a point in my life where I want to train anybody up on my dime.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. Well, Greg, this has been a great having you on the show. I really appreciate it. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way that they can reach you?
Yep, GregDickerson.com is my website. All the information's on there. I'm on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So I've got a podcast as well. So, you just Google my name and you'll see it everywhere. There's a sportscaster that's Greg Dickerson, so it's really easy to tell us apart. So we're the two that come up when you Google that name.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Greg. This has been great. It's been a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this all week. So I really thank you again for coming on the show. And if you're ever in Chicago, please, give me a call, give you a nice tour of our city. And probably not now, though. You might not want to stop by with what's going on.
Not like right this weekend, but
right. But okay, well, great.
Right now, but yeah, I'd love to see it. I've never been. My daughter's been. A lot of friends there, but that's one of the places I need to visit. Yeah,
it's a beautiful city. So thank you so much again, and hopefully you'll be back on the show at some point in the near future.
Yeah, anytime.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.